in to the pandemic. A new study out just today finds that the single largest driver of coronavirus misinformation is that guy, Donald Trump. According to researchers at Cornell University, mentions of Trump make up nearly 38% of overall misinformation in the 38 million articles they analyzed that circulated about the pandemic in English language media earlier this year. And false information about, you guessed it, miracle cures was the most prevalent topic by far. This as we continue to learn more about the possible undermining of science that is happening inside the White House today. Axios reports that CDC Director Robert Redfield was overruled when he tried to extend a no-sail order on passenger cruises where some of this country's worst outbreaks occurred early on. All the while, 28 states are still seeing an uptick in coronavirus cases this week. So far, more than 208,000 Americans have lost their lives from the pandemic, and more than 7.2 million have become sick. Let's bring in NBC News and MSNBC public health analyst Dr. Irwin Redlener. He's the founding director of Columbia University's National Center for Disaster Preparedness and political reporter with the New York Times, Nick Confessori. Nick, I want to start with you. There was a hot debate. Viewers of this network felt very strongly about it. A lot of hosts and anchors and my colleagues had strong feelings as well about not carrying Donald Trump's news conferences at the outset of the pandemic because he was disseminating bad information, dangerous information. This Cornell study seems to confirm that point of view.
Well, look, Nicole, I think what the study shows is that the president is the typhoid Mary of a second pandemic in the nation and around the world. It's a pandemic of misinformation, of false facts and miracle cures, and he is a big driver of it. The president of the White House is the most important voice in the world. His voice carries weight. It's why networks carry his news conferences so often. It's why newspapers print his words so often. But it raises a real question as to whether people are doing harm if they simply carry, a live remark of what he's saying in real time. It certainly can defeat our efforts as reporters to fact check him and provide context for viewers. I think it's an important debate that we should have as reporters.
And I guess I asked the question, Dr. Redlener, because the pandemic doesn't wait for us to figure these things out. At the time the pandemic was raging and spreading, some people were taking disinformation about masks, about hydroxychloroquine, about closures. Donald Trump was tweeting, "Liberate Virginia" and "Liberate Michigan" at the time when those governors were desperate to try to tamp down their outbreaks. He has been spreading not just disinformation, but defiant messages, contradictory messages to those in your line of work, science and medicine.
Right, Nicole. This has been incredibly distressing from day one of this pandemic. And, we used to think it was, back in the old days, that it was just a matter of ignorance and incompetence, which, of course, is a good measure of both of those in the government that's being run by Donald Trump. But I think if we learn nothing else from the Robert Woodward tapes and interviews, there's something much more than that. There's actually an intentionality, it seems, like a defiant campaign of undermining America's public health infrastructure, its ability to make appropriate judgments, and these messages of absolute dishonesty that have been put out by this White House when the president absolutely knew better, and now the incredible undermining of America's leading scientists and America's leading public health institutions. There's like a serious intentionality here for reasons that I have no idea what they would be, but it's cost the lives of many, many Americans. You talked about the 208,000 fatalities, Nicole. A good half of those could have been avoided if the president and his people had acted with more responsibility, yet they chose a path of recklessness that has caused the deaths of many Americans, and many more Americans are going to die because of the policies and the messaging that's been put out by Donald J. Trump over many, many months now. It's a tragedy of unimaginable proportions for American society.
unimaginable proportions, Nick Compastori, but we do have a new prediction. I mean, the models that predicted we'd be where we are today predict 388,000 Americans will have lost their lives by the end of the year. And God willing, none of them will get sick on a cruise ship. But we know that the CDC director tried to keep cruise ships closed, banned. Axios is reporting, quote, public health officials have privately complained that the thwarting of Redfield on the cruise ship ban is politically motivated because the industry is a major economic presence in Florida, a key battleground state where polls are statistically tied. What a horrible state of play that Donald Trump's political prospects in a battleground state are playing into a decision about whether to put thousands of people in a petri dish of a cruise ship.
I saw that story and I was so shocked, Nicole, because cruise ships are petri dishes of infection without coronavirus. How many stories have you read of passengers all getting stomach bugs from the buffet line? And now we're going to prioritize that. And it does raise the question of what's driving this. And I think what's driving it is the president's strategy has been to declare the mission is accomplished on coronavirus, to basically create a sense of normalcy, that things are creeping back to normal. Because the bill for this, the further deaths and infections, if people aren't careful, could come after Election Day, at which point he'll be out of office or safely reelected. And that is the real tragedy and the danger here, that short-term efforts to make things seem that they are normal are going to undermine us all in the long term.
Dr. Redlener, I'd love your thoughts on that, but let me give you a two-part question, and I'll give you the last word here. Seeing upticks, I'm a New Yorker and a Manhattanite, and sadly, a city and a state that was through the worst of it is now seeing some really alarming upticks in almost 24 zip codes in the New York area. Your thoughts about that, and anything you wanted to add to the cruise ship ban being overruled by political appointees?
You know, New York City and New York State actually did a tremendous job of getting this under control, and that was the case for many, many weeks, Nicole, as you well know. Now we're starting to see an uptick, as you just pointed out, and unfortunately, I think most of us in the business, my business, would say that it was inevitable that we'll start to see resurges in places that had been under control and now are not. And that is really a difficult situation, as is my grandson here knows. But the problem is that there's not much that we're going to be able to do about this. Oh, Jesus. Oh, boy. All right. Anyway.
This is what remote learning looks like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So it is. But I think the issue is here. Karen. Sorry. The issue. Oh, boy. Aaron, Oren, please. The issue is that we're going to see big upticks all over the place in the United States and elsewhere in the world. This is not going away. We're not going to be free of the COVID-19 pandemic for the next couple of years, and we need to get used to that fact. Even if we get a vaccine, it's going to be a long time before we get this under control. So I'm not the least bit surprised about what we're seeing in New York. And we have to, gear up and be adults about this and do what needs to get done to protect ourselves by doing the things that have been recommended. I am very worried, though, I say as a last point. I am. Oh, boy. What are you working on?
This is the best thing that I've seen. You can talk about whatever you want.
Oh, boy. All right. Anyway. Oh, boy, oh, boy. So anyway.
Dr. Redlener will give you the last word after that.
All right, so my last word here is that the undermining of our senior scientists and our public health agencies, the United States was looked at as the premier expertise in public health in the world for a very long time until Donald Trump came into office. That loss of reputation is going to be one of the things that would have to be repaired by a Joe Biden if he gets reelected, and it's going to take a long time. So we've undermined the credibility of our public health experts, the reputation of our health agencies, and this is a disaster that's going to just result in lots of work for the next president. Hopefully it'll be a different president, and we're just going to have to deal with this. But the expectation of more deaths many of which will be unavoidable, is unfortunately in our future, Nicole.
Dr. Red Leonard, you and your grandson, thank you for making my day. Nick Conversori, thank you.